Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our technical webinar, Managing Your Data in the Cloud. Thank you for joining us. We have a great session today. Before we begin, I'll briefly cover a few items. Everyone is muted. If you have a question, please submit your question through the Q&A box that you can find on the bottom right of your screen. Our speakers will answer them at the end of the session. All attendees will receive a link to today's recording after the session. And today's speakers are Kevin Leahy. He is the Data Center Practice Director at Aspire, and Jeff Weber. He is the Solution Architecture Manager at Cohesity. And Kevin, the time is yours.
Great, thank you. I want to thank you all for joining us today. And make sure that, I want to take the opportunity to thank Jeff as well. Apologies for skipping on a little soon. Today we're talking about managing your data in the cloud, but it's not exclusively the cloud. The reality is, in the digital era, a lot of things have changed. No news to you, but there are new data sources. But probably most important is the fact that where the data is born is not necessarily where it's going to have the most value. Now, what's also changed in this digital era is the data is defining your brand. And the result I view is the technical owner of those environments, the technical manager of those environments. The old tools and the old processes can't keep up. And so what are we going to do? The reality is there's a new normal that has, evolved over the last few years. And if you think about, what is your IT infrastructure, it started at that little cloud on the right called that hosted and private, the purpose-built environment that was your legacy data center. Then we added the hyperscale clouds. Then we added, SaaS services, things like Salesforce, Meditech, things like that. And then the private clouds came from those hyperscale clouds into the private cloud in addition to the traditional VMware private cloud. And then all of that, starts to connect to the edge, and the edge is where all the new data is being generated. Not all, but the majority. Now, from all of that environment, you're looking to deliver your applications, you need to secure it, and you need to manage the events so that your users get the user experience that you want. But what about the data? Well, in some cases, the data is trapped at that edge, right? It's used for great things, maybe turning on and off lights or shutting off machines and sensors, but it's not really, valued to the point where you can start to think about, say, in a utility, how is that energy consumption going to help you redistribute the load? And just today alone, if you think about last week, you would think about, had you known that in Texas, how would you have redistributed the load? There's data to leverage in all those SaaS applications that are opportunities for data integration going forward. But at the end, you have a lot of legacy tools. In many cases, depending on your storage types, you may have one storage array with its own tools for your imaging environments or for your object storage. You would have another for your enterprise arrays. And so you have a lot of legacy tools. The more hybrid you are, the more tools you had. And then with any one of these cloud environments, there's a multitude of storage choices. So how are you going to solve this problem of providing that value of the data? So what needs to change? Well, if data defines your brand, it should also define your IT architecture. It's important that we all recognize that the architecture in the old days would start with, how many computers am I going to have? What processing do I need to do? Well, compute is the commodity. Data is the value asset. You have to recognize that the cloud and the edge is going to be where most of your data is going to reside. So you need to think about it with that as a dominant role rather than an adjacent role. And you have to start to think about policies and processes with infrastructure independent, more of the software-driven approach as we go forward, because you can't lock yourself into each individual device and do anything useful other than just manage tools at that point. It's critical to recognize, well, your users are using cloud as self-service. Compliance not only should not be, cannot be. You have to build enforcement into that architecture in order to stay the way you need it to be. So protection has to be part of the process. In many cases, the backup teams, the DR teams were separate organizations and separate roles, but it's got to be built in. You can't, ensure that the new cloud resources that are spun up where that data is being backed up, if it's not part of the deployment process. And all of that requires a platform, not just a collection of tools. And so that new picture, you would see a data plane that spans that entire environment. Now that becomes critical because that is actually what is focused on your asset, what defines your digital business, which is your data. So we've worked extensively with Cohesity to really look at that Cohesity data platform that spans the edge to the clouds to the on-premise. It helps that define that environment. And because we've done so much with Cisco, who's our partner and our sponsor for this event, we built out that rigid solution capability in order to repeatably deliver that with high quality of service because of the integration of tools across that entire environment. So I want to spend a little bit of time, though, specifically, on Cohesity, because that's the new change here, is that notion of that data platform. So Jeff, give us your thoughts here.
Kevin, thank you so much. Appreciate the time this morning. Yeah, and what you see here at the bottom of the screen, that Cohesity data platform, and if you think about the slide that Kevin just showed you, that is essentially our data plane. It's more than that, though. Cohesity Helios, our data platform, it's extensible, it's a scalable data plane, which is really going to allow us to deliver different data management use cases, but it's also a global control plane. And that's important because as you adopt and adapt new technologies and different infrastructure, like multi-cloud environments, it's going to allow you the opportunity to manage all of that centrally. So again, Kevin talked a little bit about that data plane. This is Cohesity's data platform, which is a data plane and a control plane. So it's a lot of flexibility there. And I kind of want to spend a few minutes kind of under the hood. So if you would mind going to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the architecture of the platform. Cohesity, first, we'll start with our distributed file system, and that is our proprietary distributed file system, also the underlying object store. So SpanFS, which is what we call it, provides unlimited scalability, allows us to tier on disk and in the cloud. And it also provides instant provisioning of zero cost clones. And that's important for things like testing restores, testing disaster recovery. And then also, in addition to SpanFS, we have our proprietary snapshot engine, Snaptree. And Snaptree enables us to create fully hydrated snapshots, and again, those zero cost clones. What that does, it's going to improve our recovery time, it improves recovery time by close to 10x, but it also gives the ability to do unlimited snapshots and backups, and it does all of this with no performance degradation. Next slide, please. So in addition to the architecture, we also need to spend a few minutes talking about our scalability, and this is really key. Cohesity, if you think about it, we're a lot different. We are very different than the traditional storage vendors. Traditional storage systems, really siloed, and a lot of times all they're doing over time is just trying to jam as much CPU and compute memory into the same single system. The reality is when that system either becomes full or end of life, you're stuck with a forklift upgrade or a data migration, and that's the problem we're trying to help customers solve. We can incrementally scale. We do this through a software-defined web scale platform, and that allows us also to non-disruptively scale, meaning we can add as you grow without having to take down the platform. We're giving customers the opportunity to also grow our compute and storage independently, and that scales as well. So this is very, this I think separates us, and it also allows you to kind of meet some of those changing SLAs because the scale out solution also helps us to ingest data at scale. And then another feature that will benefit our customers is the ability to run heterogeneous clusters. So as new platforms or new solutions are available, you might add a new cluster to an existing cluster. You might have one go end of life. We can support all of that in a heterogeneous environment. Again, taking away that need to do disruptive upgrades, data migrations. Next slide, please. And kind of the last place where I'd like to leave us, so when we talk about just the, the under the hood components, is the security framework. And we understand security is top of mind for all of our customers, our partners, absolutely top of mind for Cohesity. And this is where we feel that we really differentiate ourselves from not only those legacy vendors, but a lot of the other solutions that are in the market today. And it all starts at that base. So I'm going to walk up this pyramid. But if you think about it at the base, what is the most important, one of the most important things we're delivering to our customers? And that's an immutable file system. So our immutable file system is ensuring that you can back up the data, that the backup data cannot be impacted. It can't be modified or deleted by either malware or an unauthorized user. Right? So the way we do that, basically we take the original backup job and it's kept in the immutable state. It's never made accessible. So that prevents it from being mounted to an external system. The only way that you can mount that backup in a read-write mode is through our cloning technology. And that's done automatically in our system. So although ransomware may be able to delete or modify something in that clone, it can never impact that immutable snapshot. And that's important because sophisticated malware these days is starting to go after the data that sits inside these files, these data protection solutions.
So the security question, most notably the ransomware question, comes up in every client, particularly as we're dealing with healthcare. It is, it makes the headlines, and like we've all seen the headlines of which healthcare environment was down, but certainly for governments as well. So this is a continual event. So does this replace the security that the client is already doing, or does this integrate with that approach? How do you interpret the role of this versus the rest of their security activity?
Yeah, it's a few things, and it's a great question, Kevin. We are providing additional layers of security in an area that may not be secure today. So some traditional backup solutions may not have the capability to provide immutability. They may not have some of the controls. And as I kind of walk up this pyramid, some of the things I'll hit on, that are highlighted here in green are really our differentiators. And you're right, it's no longer a matter of if I will be impacted by something like this, but when. And that's unfortunately the sad truth of the world we live in today. So what we're looking to do is make sure that if you're putting data onto our platform, it is secured and you can go to sleep at night knowing that it's secured. I recommend that you go out to our website and look at some of our customer success stories, and you'll see some, one example of a hospital that was able to quickly recover using our solution. They actually had two vendors that they were running. One was impacted, ours was not. They were quickly able to recover using a lot of what I'll talk about in a second, and it saved them from having to pay that ransom, which is significant. And so again, as we walk up the pyramid, the next step, once we've put everything onto a secure platform, we want to make sure the controls are in place. We're giving you multi-factor authentication. We understand you need granular role-based administration. We have no service backdoor, which is very important for us. So there's no master account that Cohesity owns that allows us to access your data or manipulate it in any way. The other thing here is slight roadmap item, but something that's coming is also the ability to have a secondary check for business critical actions that are being taken on the platform. Meaning, if I wanted to delete something, I would then need to submit that request and have it go to a secondary person for authorization before that action can be completed. And that's a requirement that we're starting to hear more and more from our financial customers. Also, when you think about our financial customers, and this goes well beyond that, you mentioned hospitals for things like HIPAA. We have the compliance certifications that support what we're talking about today. So mentioned immutable file system. The first thing that a financial customer might ask is, are you 17A4 compliant? And we are, and we have the third party attestation that can support that. We also have a lot of the things like the common criteria, the PCI, SOC certifications, a whole host of them. And as we continue to move forward with more use cases, more workloads in the cloud, we're going to add certifications as needed. And then again, as we move up the stack, now it's more about what do I do if I'm impacted? And we offer detection capabilities. So let's say there's a situation where your primary environment's compromised. With anomaly detection, which is in our platform, we can provide you alerts, not just to the customer, but we also receive those alerts at our support team receives those alerts. And we're looking at things like, did the primary file data change rate, is it out of the norm? Is the logical data change rate changed? Is there a significant change in what stored data we have? Is there a pattern that goes, that's an anomaly based on historical data ingest, right? Do we see something that we haven't seen before? So if you think about a ransomware situation, a lot of data getting encrypted, right? Those high change rates, those high writes that we're seeing that don't typically see, that could send an alert and take action on that. And then should you get impacted and need to respond, we want to make sure that our customers can quickly recover. So we have machine-based learning in the solution that will help us identify those clones that are clean. The right point in time snapshot is necessary to make sure we're putting something into the environment that's not also impacted, but also giving the ability to do instant mass restore, to recover hundreds of VMs and Hyper-V VMs instantaneously. So Kevin, I hope that answered your question, but as you can see, it's really not just a silver bullet of, hey, this is how we solve ransomware. We are giving you all of these different tools within the platform to make sure that the data is secure, that you have the controls in place to protect it, and that you can respond or detect any kind of activity in the environment.
Well, that respond one certainly hit a nerve for me, because one of our recent healthcare clients, when we got involved with them, they had 2 years before experienced a ransomware attack. And took them several days till they could find the clean point to which they could recover to. And so that would have definitely come in handy for them, when they were under attack.
Absolutely. And on the next slide, I'm going to hit on something else that you'll see could have helped in that situation. But kind of to shift gears a little bit, and I'll stay with that car analogy. We've looked under the hood. Now we've closed the hood. We want to take this thing for a test drive. What's the best use case for the Cohesity platform? And really, we'll go clockwise. We start a lot of conversations with integrated backup and recovery. Backup touches everything in an environment. It provides a lot of rich data. We want to make sure that that data is available to our customers to do more than just recovery. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that. But there's also an opportunity here for reduction in total cost of ownership, reducing that attack surface. We talked about what else can we do to help our customers' security posture. Well, we can help you reduce that attack surface by what we call mass data fragmentation. If you think about it, all these different silos that you have in your environment, storage solutions, you might have one backup solution you bought for virtual environments, you have one for your physical, you might have added something new to when you started implementing cloud workloads. Because we can support all of that, we allow you to consolidate, and that reduces not only total cost of ownership, but it really drives down the complexity in the environment. So it provides operational efficiencies as well. But as we kind of move through these different use cases, the platform is also a scale out NAS, right? So customers can also use it to store things like their home directories. We have customers running Cisco, working with Cisco around video surveillance, and they can use this solution to store those files as well. And then again, continuing down around the clock, we've got integrated cybersecurity. So Kevin, your example just now, should I be victim of an attack, like you said, and I needed to recover some files, I can run an application called CyberScan and look for those vulnerabilities. I can check and see if the vulnerability exists in my restored copy before I deploy it out to production. So if you think about a good workflow, I recover the data, I do a vulnerability scan, I now deploy it out to production, and now I feel confident that I can deploy in mass. And that CyberScan app is available on our marketplace. Also, we understand customers' environments are changing. We want to make sure that we're adapting and adopting with you. So our platform is built for the cloud. It is a multi-cloud solution. I talked about that control plane. That's a key component. Whether you're running backup as a service or data management as a service with Cohesity, or you have a remote office, or you've got your traditional file data center, we will make sure you're still managing everything centrally. And then, I talked about the clones early on. Being able to do dev and test is a great differentiator for our solution. To be able to serve out, let's say, a SQL database to one of your end users in your environment to do testing, but you might also still want to you're mindful of that security, you're mindful of those compliance requirements out there. So within our marketplace, we also have something called data mask. And what data mask allows us to do is when we present that clone, we can hide some of that personal identifiable information that could be sensitive or could open you up to a fine through a specific regulation, like say California Consumer Protection Act. And then as you move up the stack here, we have other use cases. I'll kind of leave us with the backup target storage use case. We could, in an environment, we could just act as the storage target for your backup solution, again, giving you a lot of those operational efficiencies through our global deduplication. And then last, you see in the middle of the marketplace, I hit on that, a couple times, but there's a number of different applications that are available to our customers to get more. And the idea is, how do you bring the compute to the data instead of having to stand up additional networking, additional compute and storage to run something like maybe a Splunk environment? Could you run that on the data platform? And again, bringing that compute to the data is how we describe that. Next slide. So again, once we've talked about the use cases, we talked about the technology, but we also understand customers are looking, and our partners are looking to really help automate a lot of these tasks. Right? How do we, again, drive some of that complexity down? How do we improve operational efficiency? Well, we do that through our API first infrastructure. Right? We can provide to you some examples. You have the capability of using our developer kit to create your own. But for example, if you wanted to go out and you go out to developer.cohesity.com, you'll see a repository for PowerShell. And there's some examples where you can create a VM in vCenter and then add that VM to our protection job within Cohesity. Ansible, right? Let's say you've got hundreds of physical Linux servers, and you want to deploy those agents out. You could leverage Ansible as a way to make that happen. vCloud Director, vRealize. With vRealize, we've got a VRO plugin. That VRO plugin allows us to leverage a lot of the self-service workflows. And then in the middle, right there at the bottom, one that we hear a lot, and I'm sure, Kevin, this is something that's top of mind for you as well, is what is that ServiceNow capability? What can we do with that? And we're hearing that more and more with our customers. So
we hear that all the time. In fact, just yesterday I was on a call with a large client, and they were ServiceNow, and we were discussing the architecture to move, an event from ServiceNow into, in that case, it was Cisco Intersight, and how we propagated that down into the environment to vCenter. But honestly, it wasn't really discussing the data. It was about the VMware environment. So does this really help us pull the data into that story?
Absolutely. Yeah. You set me up perfect, Kevin. It's almost like we planned it. You go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about more how we work with ServiceNow. We are available on the ServiceNow store. You can go out there. We are certified with ServiceNow. And here's a great workflow example, Kevin. I think this is where you're headed. We can make sure that you can add a VM to our protection job, remove VMs. You can recover the VM or the file. You can clone it. There's approval-based workflows. So from a VMware perspective, you got a lot of that integration. But we can also go beyond that. If you're creating ServiceNow tickets, you can use our alerts to generate those tickets. So a lot more integration is available here. We could spend a whole half hour probably just on this piece. I think it maybe was something we could set up for a future session. But yes, absolutely, we can help with that ServiceNow integration.
But it's not just integration. It's actually, actually driving that integrated end-to-end ticketing system. Are you seeing that as a gap that a lot of your clients have today in terms of pulling those pieces together?
Absolutely. And I think that's where partners like Aspire really do help Cohesity. They're able to connect those dots and allow our customers to see the value of not just deploying the platform, but leveraging things like ServiceNow in their environment to create a full end-to-end workflow. I kind of just to recap, I think, from a Cohesity differentiator, right? What are the advantages? And we talked about the technology and what that technology allows us to do. And it's about the simple scale out operations. We want to make sure our customers are driving down that total cost of ownership, improving their operational efficiencies. And we're doing that through things like our global space efficiency. So deduplication globally, not based on workload or location, but globally. Instant availability, so that an opportunity to quickly recover from an attack or to serve out a clone that's available to a customer for DR or testing or test dev. Those apps, right, bringing compute to the data, driving more value out of all the data that we're touching. You're backing it up every day. You're occasionally doing those restores, but what else can I do with that data? We understand customers want to drive more value there. The platform, something I failed to mention earlier, and I should have, was, our distributed file system is also indexed, meaning that we can do global actionable search. And we have applications in our marketplace that take advantage of those, like Insight and Spotlight, but we're also heading towards a compliance and governance as a service, which will leverage some of those great applications that Amazon has built, like Macy, for compliance and regulation requirements. And then we talked a little bit about that integrated security. But where can we go from here? And that's, again, I mentioned this, we want to adopt and adapt technology with our customers. We want to make sure that we're flexible, and we want to know, and we saw this over the past year as customers started to realize that the traditional data center had some challenges if they couldn't get people into it, right? Starting to look more at SaaS-based offerings, starting to look more at managed services through their service providers. We want to make sure that no matter what decision our customers are making, the underlying platform supports their use cases, and that control plane gives them the ability to manage it no matter what decisions they make on how they use it. So I'll leave it at that, Kevin. I really appreciate you giving me the time this morning. Thank you.
It's fantastic, Jeff. Thank you. And I'll tell you, the global actionable search, we come up frequently as we help clients figure out how do they lifecycle manage their data from their on-premise into the cloud, perhaps into S3 as it ages out, and you want to move it to a cheaper instance. And that ability to still search on that is critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other element, just to play up for a moment, is the integration with the Cisco team and the Cisco products, which as a service provider, as we deliver these integrated solutions is great, but equally important is knowing that the designs are validated, and probably more important as the managed service provider is the ability to propagate, from Intersight that's looking at the workload performance and managing and supporting, patching, et cetera, all of the hardware. Now you've added that data, but the connections provide between all of those. And that is critical for us because that's that consistency of integration that allows us to really move fast for the client. So next step for our clients who are listening, as we said, key here is to think about the architecture for the future, and that's got to be focused on data. You can't think about compute. There's infinite compute resources, but it's really about how am I going to manage that data across that end-to-end environment. Data retention policies is the classic story, but now you're looking to really move that to data lifecycle with the full flexibility of moving it from the edge to the center and back out to lower cost storage over time, and then being able to search against it. That life cycle is different than just keep it in one place and then expunge it when possible. Staff skills are going to change. You're going to focus on things like policies for data, and with automated enforcement, you can't trust every developer who's going to spin up a new VM to do the right thing. They're focused on value function. They're not focused on your policies. And to that end, right, integrate your security process with the data management and protection. Understand those alerts and how to recover, as well as when you need to take action. You don't want to be suffering under false positives, but neither do you want to be a long outage because you can't get access to your data. And so with that, I'm going to thank everyone for participation, and especially thank you, Jeff, for joining in. Appreciate it. And if there's any questions or opportunities for us to continue the conversation, we're anxious to do so.
Thank you.